Before we begin, remember, stories like this are hidden on purpose. Subscribe now so you never miss the real crimes history tried to bury. The screaming started after midnight, echoing through the stone corridors of the Cook County Jail. Guards rushed toward the sound, boots slamming against the cold floor. Inside one dark cell, a man lay still. His face was bruised, his body broken, and his eyes stared at nothing. Everyone inside the jail knew why he was dead. He had talked, or at least someone believed he had. In Gilded Age Chicago, that belief alone could get a man killed. As the guards dragged his body away, one question filled the cell blocks: who was next? Chicago in the late 1800s was a city growing too fast for its own good. Smoke poured from factories, trains screamed through crowded neighborhoods, and crime followed the money. Police corruption was common, and jails were not places of safety. They were pressure cookers filled with fear, hunger, and rage. To control inmates, authorities used a secret weapon: informants. Some prisoners were quietly offered better food, lighter treatment, or early release. All they had to do was listen and report. But once word spread, even a rumor could be deadly. Inside the jail, trust did not exist. Prisoners slept with one eye open. Whispers passed through cells at night, soft and sharp like knives. Who was speaking to guards? Who was missing during roll call? Who came back with clean clothes or extra bread? Men began watching each other more closely than the guards did. And when suspicion grew, violence followed. Inmates accused of being informants were beaten, strangled, or left to die while others turned away. These were not random acts, they were warnings. One murder changed everything. A small-time thief named Patrick O'Donnell was found dead in his cell in 1891. Officials called it a fight gone wrong. Prisoners told a different story. O'Donnell had been questioned repeatedly by detectives. Soon after, rumors spread that he was giving names. Days later, he was dead. No one was charged. The message was clear: talk and you die. Stay silent and you might live. The killings did not stop. Instead, they multiplied. Jailhouse informants became targets, whether guilty or innocent. Guards often looked the other way, afraid or paid to do so. Corruption ran so deep that some officers were accused of setting prisoners up, placing suspected informants into dangerous cells on purpose. The jail was no longer just holding criminals, it was creating victims. Outside the jail, newspapers hinted at scandal, but the truth stayed buried behind iron bars. Families never learned how their sons died. Officials denied everything. Inside, inmates waited, listening to footsteps at night, knowing the next scream could come from their own cell. And then, one prisoner decided to break the silence, even knowing what it would cost him. The man stood shaking in the middle of the cell block, his back pressed against cold iron bars. His name was Thomas Gallagher, and every prisoner in Cook County Jail was staring at him. Moments earlier, a guard had called his name and led him away for questioning. Now he was back. His hands were clean. His face looked calm. Too calm. In a place where fear ruled, calm was dangerous. Someone whispered a single word that spread like fire: informant. Thomas knew it the second he heard it. His heart began to race. He also knew something worse. In this jail, rumors killed faster than knives. Chicago's jail system in the 1990s ran on secrets. Police detectives were under pressure to solve crimes in a city exploding with violence. Gangs, political machines, and corrupt businesses all needed scapegoats. So officers leaned on inmates. They promised protection, better treatment, or freedom. Sometimes they lied. Sometimes they delivered. But the moment an inmate was suspected of talking, protection disappeared. Guards could not watch every cell, and many did not want to.
Thomas Gallagher had been arrested for burglary. It was a small crime. He expected to serve a short sentence and leave, but during his first week inside, detectives pulled him aside. They asked questions about gang activity, about names, about plans. Thomas said very little. but he said enough, or at least enough for someone to notice. When he returned to the cell block, silence followed him. No one spoke, no one moved. That silence was louder than any scream. Days passed. Tension built slowly, like a storm forming in the dark. Thomas stopped eating. He stopped sleeping. At night, he heard whispers through the walls. Some prisoners argued about him. Others argued about who should deal with him. This is how jailhouse justice worked. There were no trials, no proof needed, only belief. Guards noticed the tension, but did nothing. Violence inside the jail often made their jobs easier. Fewer problems, fewer mouths. Then came the beating. It happened during morning movement, when prisoners were sent to wash. Someone shoved Thomas from behind. Another punched him in the ribs. He fell. Boots followed. Guards arrived late. They always arrived late. Thomas survived, but barely. His injuries told everyone the same thing. The warning had been delivered. Next time, there would be no stopping. Outside the jail, newspapers were beginning to notice a pattern. Another inmate dead, another labeled accident, another family asking questions. Reporters wrote about overcrowding, corruption, and brutality. Officials denied it all. They blamed criminals. They blamed bad luck. But inside, inmates knew the truth. Informants were being marked, and someone was helping make it happen. One guard, Officer William Haynes, became a name whispered among prisoners. He had a habit of moving inmates at strange hours, of placing certain men into cells known for violence, of leaving doors unlocked just long enough. Haynes denied everything, but rumors followed him like shadows. Some believed he was paid by gangs to expose informants. Others believed he was protecting fellow officers by silencing witnesses. In a corrupt system, motives did not matter. Results did. Thomas Gallagher tried to save himself. He begged for protective custody. He wrote letters. He even tried to confess to crimes he never committed, hoping for a quick sentence and removal. Nothing worked. Protection did not exist for men like him. The jail needed informants. It also needed them silent. The night Thomas died, the jail was unusually quiet. Guards reported nothing wrong. Hours later, they found him hanging in his cell. Officials called it suicide. Prisoners called it murder. They knew Thomas had been threatened. They knew he had begged for help. His death joined a growing list of men who never made it out. But Thomas's death did something different. It broke someone. Another inmate, older and harder, named Samuel Price, had seen too much. He had survived beatings. He had kept silent for years. But watching Thomas die changed him. Samuel decided he would talk, not to guards, not to police, to the outside world. Samuel began passing messages to a reporter through visitors, names, dates, patterns. He described how informants were identified, how guards helped expose them, how deaths were hidden. The reporter listened carefully. This was dangerous information. Publishing it could cost lives or save them. As the story prepared to break, tension inside the jail exploded. Guards searched cells more often. Prisoners were moved without warning. Samuel felt eyes on him everywhere. He knew he had crossed a line, and he knew what crossing that line meant. One night, as Samuel lay awake, he heard footsteps stop outside his cell. A key turned slowly in the lock, and that was when he realized he might not live to see the morning.
The cell door did not open. Instead, it stayed locked, the key turning back the other way. The footsteps moved on. Samuel Price stayed frozen on his bunk, holding his breath. He did not sleep the rest of the night. By morning, he understood one thing clearly. Someone knew. The jail had learned that the silence was breaking. Samuel had spent most of his life behind bars. He knew the rules. Do your time, do not talk, do not stand out. But now he had done the one thing no prisoner was supposed to do. He had told the truth to the outside world. And in Chicago's jail system of the 1890s, truth was more dangerous than any weapon. The reporter Samuel had contacted was named Charles Whitman. He worked for a growing Chicago newspaper that had begun challenging city corruption. When Samuel's messages reached him, Whitman did not publish right away. He investigated. He checked death records. He compared dates. He noticed something chilling. Inmate deaths labeled as accidents or illness often came just days after private meetings with detectives. The pattern was real, and it pointed to something dark inside Cook County Jail. Whitman finally printed the story. He did not use all the names, but he used enough. He wrote about informants placed among violent prisoners, about guards moving men at night, about deaths that were never properly investigated. The article caused outrage. City officials denied everything. The police chief called it lies. The warden said the jail was under control. But the public had read the words, and they could not unread them. Inside the jail, panic spread fast. Guards were ordered to tighten control. Searches became constant. Prisoners were questioned aggressively. Anyone suspected of talking was watched closely. Samuel felt the pressure closing in. Other inmates avoided him. Some looked at him with anger, others with fear. No one wanted to be near the man who had brought the spotlight inside. Then, something unexpected happened. More inmates began to speak. Quietly, carefully. Families of dead prisoners came forward. Former inmates told similar stories. A small crack had turned into a widening break. The jail could no longer hide behind silence alone. City leaders announced an internal review. It sounded serious, but many doubted it would change anything. Chicago had a long history of protecting itself. Corruption had roots deep in the ground. Still, investigators entered the jail. Questions were asked. Records were requested. Guards grew nervous. Some stopped showing up for work. Officer William Haynes was one of them. The guard whose name had been whispered for months suddenly disappeared. Officials said he had taken leave. Others said he fled the city. Prisoners believed something else. They believed he had been protected, moved quietly out of sight like so many others before him. Samuel Price knew the danger was not over. Exposure did not mean safety. In some ways, it made things worse. Now there were angry guards, angry inmates, and a system desperate to regain control. Samuel asked again for protection. This time, he was moved, not to safety, to isolation. The cell was small, quiet, too quiet. Days passed with no word, no visitors, no news. Samuel wondered if the story had changed anything at all. He wondered if Thomas Gallagher and the others had died for nothing. Doubt crept in, heavy and slow. Then, one morning, Samuel heard voices outside his cell. Different voices, calm voices, investigators. They asked him questions, careful questions. Samuel answered honestly. He told them everything, names, times, methods. He spoke until his throat hurt. For the first time, he felt something unfamiliar. Hope. But hope inside a jail is fragile. That night, the power went out briefly. Darkness filled the corridor. When the lights returned, Samuel heard shouting. A fight had broken out in another block. Guards ran past his cell. Chaos returned, just as it always did. The next day, a guard slipped Samuel a piece of news, quietly, almost kindly. The investigation was slowing. Political pressure was mounting. Too many powerful people were being named. The city wanted the story to fade. Samuel understood the message. Justice was getting tired. Days later, the newspaper printed a smaller article. The investigation was ongoing. No charges yet, no arrests. Public interest began to drift. Chicago moved on, as it always did. But Samuel was still there, still waiting, still marked. One evening, as the jail settled into uneasy silence, Samuel heard footsteps again. This time, they stopped at his cell. The key did not turn away. It turned toward the lock. And as the door began to open, Samuel realized the system he had exposed might be ready to erase him. The door opened slowly, its metal hinge crying out into the dark hallway. Samuel Price did not move. He sat on his bunk, hands tight against his legs, waiting for the worst. A guard stood there, his face hard to read. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the guard stepped aside. Two men in plain coats walked in. They were not jail staff. They were investigators sent by the state, not the city. And that difference meant everything. Samuel's heart pounded as they told him the truth. The investigation had gone further than anyone inside the jail knew. Too many stories matched. Too many deaths followed the same pattern. Informants questioned, moved, isolated, then found dead. The city had tried to slow it down, but pressure from outside Chicago had forced their hand. Someone higher up wanted answers, real ones. Samuel was taken out of the cell block that night, quietly. No announcement, no chains clanging, just a long walk down a corridor he thought he would die in. Other inmates watched through the bars. Some nodded at him, others looked away. They understood what this moment meant. One man had survived long enough to speak again. In the weeks that followed, the truth came out in pieces. Not all at once, never all of it, but enough. Investigators confirmed that jailhouse informants had been used without protection, that guards had exposed them, sometimes on purpose, that deaths had been labeled accidents to avoid blame. A few officers were dismissed, one supervisor resigned. No one powerful went to prison, but the silence was broken. The newspapers returned to the story. Families of dead inmates finally had words for what happened to their sons and brothers. Public anger flared, then slowly cooled. That was how it always went. But something had changed inside the jail. Guards were watched more closely. Movements were logged. Informants were no longer placed openly among violent inmates. It was not justice, but it was a crack in the wall. Samuel Price was transferred out of Cook County Jail that night. Official records said it was for his safety. Unofficially, it was to make him disappear from the story. He was moved to another prison far from Chicago. His name faded from headlines. He lived. That alone made him different from the others. The men who died did not get that ending. Patrick O'Donnell, Thomas Gallagher, and many more whose names were never printed. Their deaths stayed in dusty files, marked by false causes and missing details. But among prisoners, their stories were remembered, passed quietly from cell to cell, warnings carved into memory. Do not trust the system. Do not trust silence. Chicago moved into a new century, but the lesson stayed behind. Jails were not just places to hold criminals. They were places where power could be abused, where fear could be used as a weapon, and where truth could be buried with a body. The jailhouse informant murders of the Gilded Age were not accidents. They were the result of choices made in the dark. Years later, reforms came, slowly, after more deaths, after more scandals, but the pattern first exposed in the 1890s never fully disappeared. Even today, informants still face danger, still disappear, still die under unclear circumstances. The walls are cleaner now, the language is softer, but the risk remains. Samuel Price lived out his sentence and was released quietly. No apology, no protection, just freedom with a past that followed him everywhere. He never spoke publicly again. He did not need to. The truth he helped reveal had already done its work. Inside Cook County Jail, new prisoners arrived every day, unaware of the history beneath their feet. Stone walls do not speak, but if they could, they would tell a story of whispers, fear, and men killed not for what they did, but for what they were believed to know. And in that silence, the real crime of the Gilded Age still echoes. If this story stayed with you, it means the truth matters. Subscribe and stay with us as we uncover the crimes they hoped you'd forget.